It's hard to believe that nearly half of 2026 has flown by already and brought a ton of brilliant games along with it. And while you may think that it's a relatively slow start to the year considering how the rest of it is looking crowded in a way that is, frankly, a tad overwhelming, that doesn't mean that we haven't had a few titles that we won't forget even as we try to get through the bevy of good ones that are coming our way. We sat back and thought about the ones that have managed to make us grin to ourselves every time we think about them and are happy to tell you about them now. So without further ado, let's get started. LEGO Batman Legacy of the Dark Knight. With a gameplay loop that was straight out of Arkham, a version of Gotham that was absolutely enjoyable to explore, and a lot of wit, charm, and humor thrown in, this one was music to the pointy ears of Batman fans, who have been rather starved of a solid take on the Dark Knight ever since Rocksteady's Arkham Knight. Everything a Batman fan wanted was right there, from a close look at Bruce's early days before he became an urban legend that struck fear into the hearts of Gotham's wrongdoers, to solid takes on the rest of the cast, and a whole lot of references to the character's long and often complex presence in DC's stories over the years. It's rare to see humor work so well in Gotham, a place where there usually aren't many laughs to be found, unless they're of the maniacal cackle of the Joker, but this one had us chuckling to ourselves, even as we were beating criminals to a pulp as the Dark Knight. It's both Batman and LEGO done right, and balanced so well it's more than earned a place on this list. Mouse PI for Hire. The next one we're talking about is another charmer set in a dark and gritty world. Jack Pepper's investigation to a magician's disappearance, all set in a stylized version of 1930s America with a population made entirely of rodents and shrews, was a solid tale and a very entertaining shooter packed into one well-animated package. Intelligent writing, great characters, and a lot of spilled ink were the highlights of our time with this one. And while it could have used a bit of balancing to be just perfect, what was on offer was still quite fun to engage with. We found ourselves making cheese-related puns for quite a while after we rolled credits on this one, and well, that's saying something when you consider that the game itself drops a significant number of those over the course of its runtime. This noir adventure's definitely worth undertaking if you're looking for a fun game to play before the rest of the year's releases begin to take up more of your free time. Pragmata. As the latest addition in a long line of bangers this year, Pragmata is definitely a strong addition to a solid lineup of games. As a shooter that has you working a hacking minigame almost parallel, there's enough innovation to a tried and tested formula to make it an interesting proposition, well, right off the bat. But Pragmata's true beauty lies in how it integrates that innovation into a heartwarming, wholesome story that sees protagonists Hugh and Diana surpass their innate differences as a human and an android to form a friendship that delivers quite the emotional payoff. That bond was helped along by a story that explored complex themes without delving into too much philosophy, leaving just enough room for a more direct, robust pace that was very welcome indeed. We're quite sure we'll be seeing more of Hugh and Diana in the years to come, and that is something that makes us quite happy, considering that their first outing ended on quite the cliffhanger. Saros. Carcosa is a place no one in their right mind would want to go back to, unless the person in question is a fan of Returnal's take on bullet hell shooters. But this one took things up a notch on all fronts, and the result was a title that was unsurprisingly awesome while remaining grounded enough to make the story it was trying to sell us not only believable, but quite emotionally resonant as well. Arjun was a protagonist with layers and issues of his own, trying to work with the rest of the cast to uncover mysteries that tested his resolve and sanity. Getting to go along on such an adventure and the challenges that we faced at his side were not just a pleasure, but a test of our own skill and determination to see it through. The difficulty was always there, and perhaps even an expected part of the experience. But what we didn't expect was for the entire thing to have us somberly reflecting on the themes it presented, even as we tried to dodge and block attacks that were ethereally beautiful while being efficiently deadly. This one's quite easy to recommend, and a great one from Housemarque. Forza Horizon 6. We've always loved to join the Horizon Festival wherever in the world that it takes us to, but this one's more than just a great excuse for some arcade racing and a bevy of car-related activities to take on. It's an authentic take on one of modern gaming's most popular destinations, and one that takes a lot of effort to nail down in a way that has us constantly ignoring a need for sleep in order to chase the next band that would unlock more of it to enjoy. This one's visuals and weather system were already strong reasons to dive in, but what's made us stay is how it brings Japan's many locales to life in ways that make driving around and soaking in the sights as attractive an option as engaging in some high-speed races that can really get the adrenaline flowing. Forza Horizon 6 is the franchise's best version of the festival yet, and it's going to be quite a challenge for Playground Games to top this one. However, if any studio can achieve that feat, the one behind this masterpiece certainly can. Nioh 3. You were probably waiting for this one if you've dived into Team Ninja's third installment in a franchise that already had a lot going for it before this one came along. But with two distinct playstyles, the return of the stance-based combat system, a truckload of weapons and builds, and a whole wide world to test it all out in, it's easy to see why this one has us returning to it whenever there's a good bit of downtime to make use of. The open world-ish approach to its level design works very well with an exploration loop that's designed around collecting loot, experience, and secrets in a world where even a minute advantage can mean the difference between life and death. Of course, the enemies and bosses you face down are a highlight of that experience, with familiar foes and fresh ones bringing a level of challenge that would be daunting if not for the plethora of tools you're given to deal with them. So if you're looking to cut loose and enjoy a combat system that absolutely slaps, in a world that's designed to have you in fights more than you're out of them, well, Nioh 3 is the best one to pick out of all of the titles that have come out so far in 2026. 007 First Light. Well, IO Interactive finally managed to make a Bond game that could top GoldenEye, and we're glad that it did. It takes on a young, more reckless yet equally charming version of Bond that has landed quite well. The gameplay loop on offer is equally captivating, making good use of the studio's experience with great combat and stealth gameplay to deliver a title that could have you diving into a new playthrough just to satisfy your own curiosity about how different missions could play out if you were to make varying choices. Open-ended level design, brutal combat, cool gadgets, and of course some very memorable set pieces help this one tell a story about Bond that hasn't been told before. The gameplay lets you be the man himself in ways that are so darn satisfying that they're really hard to describe to somebody who hasn't joined in on the fun. And best of all is the fact that they work so well together that this one's a title we cannot get enough of. The Hitman DNA from IO's previous work is in there, but it's been used so well in First Light that it makes the game stand out on its own well enough to be a strong addition to what the year has had to offer. Pokémon Poptopia. A life sim and builder that weaves Pokemon into the mix? That is clearly a recipe for success, but things could always go wrong if the execution falls flat. Well, that isn't the case with Pokémon Poptopia, and it's a delightful blend of Animal Crossing and the popular anime, one that's enough to keep you spending hours in the rather desolate version of Kanto that it presents you with. Joining Ditto in an effort to build the land to one where trainers and Pokemon can live their lives to the fullest was so full of fun and charm that this one grew on us pretty quickly and hasn't outstayed its welcome even though we've been playing it for nearly 3 months now. There's always something to do here, and it's often so endearing that you can't help but smile as you go about your day in the game's world. Poptopia is a great game irrespective of whether the anime and manga were a part of your childhoods, and might even get you started on an obsession that many of us have carried all of our lives. Crimson Desert. Well, we're sure you've already guessed that Crimson Desert definitely ranks high among 2026's best. Pywell is a world that we just cannot get enough of, as this one's an evolving experience that's constantly bringing new ways to engage with everything it has to offer. Cliff's fight to unify the land and return the Greymanes to their former glory might not have released in the best of states, but this one's managed to go past all of those initial hiccups to become an open-world experience that's walking the line between single-player and live service in a way that, well, it's kept us on our toes. It doesn't get any better than this as far as open worlds are concerned, although GTA 6 could come along and force us to sing a different tune. Nevertheless, Pywell's a place of many fond memories, and that isn't going to change even if Rockstar manages to pull us away from it for a while. Resident Evil Requiem. 2 protagonists, 2 different playstyles, and a setting that brought the story right back to where it started, were all factors that worked in this one's favor, to be sure. But it's in the way that all of it was handled that made this one genuinely feel like a celebration of the genre's long-running history. Leon's amazing fighting style worked well as a contrast to Grace's sincere vulnerability in a story that could have had better big bads, but was nonetheless quite revelatory as far as the franchise's meta-narrative was concerned. It was also a way to set up a future in which its entire cast could, and perhaps should, work together to take on a world that's been forever changed by the adventure on offer here. Requiem is Resident Evil at its finest, and there's no bigger compliment that we can give it than that. Alright, and that's a wrap on our picks for the first half of 2026. We're sure that this one's going to have you nodding at most of the ones that we've liked, even if you think others should have made the cut. Either way, it's been an exciting year for video games, with a very heavy second half that's sure to keep us on our toes, so bring it on, we say. And that'll be about it for this one. If you guys like what we're doing at GamingBolt, please consider subscribing to our channel, and I'll see you guys on the next video.